This week, we welcome Jason Lang, Senior Security Consultant at TrustedSec, to talk about pen testing, actually, and how we do that on remote employees and how we might do that with and without Active Directory. In our second segment, we welcome Wes Widner, Cloud and Engineering Manager at CrowdStrike, talk about audio security and why personal voice assistants are the wave of the future. In the security news, how an iOS 13 flaw could provide access to contacts with passcode. Equifax demands more information before making payouts. Confidential data of 24.3 million patients were discovered online. And a SIM flaw that lets attackers or hackers, I say attackers, hijack any phone by sending an SMS message. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who I hope has a wittier intro than this one, Mr. Paul Asadoria.
I do not, but welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 620, recorded on September 19th, 2019, right here in G-Unit Studios, getting ready for Halloween, I see. Very nice, very nice. Very happy about that. I love Halloween. It's probably my most favorite holiday because you get to dress up and get candy. I mean, what's better than that, right?
When a fat jolly man comes down the chimney and leaves you presents?
Speaking of candy, Mr. Larry Pesci is here with us.
Hey now. Well, I think I like Halloween now too.
What's going on, dude? You're back here in studio finally. It's awesome.
And
we missed you.
Looks like I got a couple weeks in studio, back to back, as it were.
Yeah.
I don't think I have many trips between now and the time I go to Singapore right before Halloween.
On the lines via either Skype or Zoom, Mr. Lee Neely is here. What are you sipping there, Lee?
Well, I just was brought a nice shot of Maker's Mark to help smooth out the day, and I think this is a great way to cap the day off.
I completely agree.
It's also a great way to start the next one.
Hey, it's 2 in 1.
That's right.
Yep.
It is the cause and the cure. Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome.
I'm here in person via Skype.
Yay.
Yeah, it's good to be. Wait, I do have to show off the T-shirt. Hang on. Here we go.
It's very nice. Yeah, okay. For the audio listeners, it says I am Root, and it's Groot at the keyboard.
It's Groot.
Yes.
It's very cool. So it's great to be here. I don't think I've seen you guys in a couple of weeks, so maybe I did. I don't know. I don't remember. I drank the memories away, I think.
That happens.
Yep,
that happens.
It does.
We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider, which means when you register for and attend one of our webcasts, you get 1 CPE credit per webcast. You can register for upcoming webcasts with extra hop and core security or all of them by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them on demand at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Jason Lang is here with us. He worked on TrustedSec's advisory, emulation, and threat research team. His job is red teaming, purple teaming, and pen testing. Jason has been in InfoSec for over 10 years, with over 5 years in offensive security and penetration testing. Jason, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yes,
Good
nice to have you. Just a reminder, the TrustedSec landing page is trustedsec.com/securityweekly. Go there for special treats. Now, Jason, when you and I started talking about pen testing is a increasingly more of a broad topic, I feel like. There's more and more niches every day. And a couple of the things that I kind of came to mind for me that we've talked about on the show are, for one, how do you do pen tests on remote employees? How do you draw the lines between, is it their personal computer? Is it a work computer? How do you if you're pulling passwords from memory, are they their passwords, someone else's passwords? What's the separation? And more importantly, I think from the company's perspective, who wants to be more secure because they're having a pen test, how do I understand, excuse me, my risks and my exposures and what the threats might look like in the situation of remote workers? So, Jason, I'll turn it to you to talk about some of the work you've been doing at TrustedSec.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, on the remote work side, the kind of the interesting part about that is that when it comes to testing employees, like let's say for example, I send out a phishing campaign. If I do that and it lands on somebody's machine and they're logged in from home, they have a VPN connection or something along those lines back to their office. The shell that I have, that from my point, is as I'm on a company asset, and so we do internal situational awareness right away. Just to see, are we on a personal machine? Are we on a corporate machine? That kind of thing, just because we don't want to be on
Right.
A user's personal machine, anything like that. So, the being is that if I get a shell, and the email is in connection back to their corporate office, which there always is. I shouldn't say there always is, but there usually is. Then that works just fine for my purposes, because from my standpoint, it's basically just a hard line back into the corporate network. And so I can interrogate Active Directory, I can interrogate file shares, I can do everything else that I would normally do if they were connected directly into the corporate network.
Just slower. And that's provided that the system that they're using to work from remotely is in fact part of the domain. And also that they, it doesn't, not a requirement, but having a VPN back into headquarters, so to speak, is also, and I guess I talk too much about newer technology. These are still things, like when you get a laptop from a company, it's part of the domain, and you might still need to use some kind of fat client VPN in a lot of cases. Is that your experience, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe,
and
Jason, sorry, you were breaking up there. Maybe disable your
working on
video entirely.
On Mac, and even a VPN client. Disable my video. Here we go. I can do like mirror my video. Does that work?
Can you disable it entirely? Yeah, it's getting really. Your content's awesome.
Looking.
Yeah.
Where? How do I shut this off? I never did. Shoot. Stop video.
All right, let's try that. So
yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. So Jason, I was just commenting that I'm surprised that people still join remote computers to the domain and use more traditional VPN clients over a lot of the newer technology that's out there.
Well, and from the standpoint of a corporation, VPN is a tried and true technology. So, it works. Everyone that gets assigned a corporate asset, like a standard ThinkPad, and that's what I see. It's either Dell or it's a ThinkPad. You show up on site, and that's what people are using, and so they're just rolling out VPN clients, whether it's Palo Alto or Cisco or things like that. That's just how they get connected. Or maybe they have SSL VPN, so their SSL VPN backend, with a multi-factor, authentication or something along those lines. But from my standpoint as an attacker, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that they're connected and they have a connection back to Active Directory. They're signed in with their domain credentials. So like you pointed out, it is slower, but I don't care. I'll fire up a job and, go pour myself a drink. I mean, that's totally fine.
Right.
To do something like that.
So Jason, what path are you taking to that remote machine? Are you finding it over the network, or are you coming back from the corporate network and exploiting it?
Yeah, normally remote machines are going to be end user workstations. And so if I land on a remote box, it's going to be because a user is at a coffee shop, or they're more likely at home, checking their email in the evening. And if they see my fish at night and I see a shell come in at night, then I know that chances are they're connected out via VPN. Lots and lots of users check their email, before bed. That's, things like that, their habit. So, and that's actually an interesting point as well, because if users are checking their email on their phones, well, I'm not going to get a shell if I have a, Windows-based payload configured for that. So I need to be looking at the user agent that's coming into my box and then doing redirection based on the user agent. So if it's like an iOS device, maybe I can, send them to a page where I can harvest credentials instead of trying to send them, a shell like I would on a standard Windows box. So, but yeah, normally if it's at night, that's kind of the big telltale. And I think eventually we're going to see more of this, because more and more corporations are going to, like the work from home model. And so that VPN situation is just going to get all the more critical, from my standpoint. So it's going to be even on me to make sure that, if I start browsing their local network, that I'm not looking at personal devices. I mean, nobody wants to see that. So, right. Doing that kind of situational awareness is important once you first land on the box.
Totally get it, and that's really good prevention to have. I was asking because I was in an earlier conversation today about split tunnel versus non-split tunnel VPN, and a split tunnel VPN doesn't restrict what can connect to that host and potentially hop through it. It makes a really nice router out of the host if you've got split tunnel enabled. And I've been in situations where we've had attackers come in that way. And your point of it, catching them working from home, clicking on something, and you got their workstation or iOS device or Android, probably much more prevalent than the old find the split tunnel or not split tunnel and get in scenario.
Yeah.
And you know what amazes me too, though, is that still today we're talking about email phishing as the primary mechanism or technology or a tactic that is used by attackers and penetration testers to gain a foothold in the organization. Would everyone agree that that's still probably the top way?
I would say it's either that or brute forcing. So if I can brute, if there's services out there on the perimeter that are brute forceable, I will absolutely go after those, because truthfully, I would rather brute my way in than have to make a phishing campaign, because phishing today is hard. I mean, you're talking about standing up dedicated infrastructure. You're talking about crafting an evasive payload. I mean, it's not like the days where you could send out a bunch of campaigns in your 1 week pen test and get a ton of shells. I mean, those days are long gone.
Oh, interesting. So the bar has been raised, but it's still very, very successful.
I would argue that the sophistication of the organization might come into play on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. So if we're seeing controls that are getting rolled out. So for example, any organization can go buy a control like CrowdStrike and implement it. They roll it out. They roll it out with Falcon. It does a good job detecting some standard attacks that we would do, and we have to work a lot harder to be evasive with tools like CrowdStrike or FireEye or things like that. Those are really good tools, and they've set the bar at a higher level for organizations where, and this is something that concerns me about really, really, really good controls that you just kind of buy and throw in your environment. If your security is still crappy, same shared local admin password everywhere and unpatched systems, and you're relying on a really robust EDR to protect you. Well, they may, but what if they don't? And
Right.
what if? And that kind of stuff is a little scary to me.
But so I was
go
just
ahead,
going to make a comment on the raise the bar concept, and he's absolutely right that you cannot use a commodity off the shelf payload generation anymore like a Metasploit and expect to get any traction with an organization that's deployed some of these solutions. They're just going to be defeated immediately.
Yeah, because everyone's got the signatures for the popular payloads and Metasploit and all that. Yeah.
Which strangely enough, like if you roll back about 5 years, that was not true. You would think it was true. And we actually criticized the endpoint guys a lot. Well, guess what? They listened.
Yeah, that is 100% true.
Yeah,
100% true. I actually gave a talk at DerbyCon that was about that 2 years ago, where just took off the shelf payloads from Metasploit and Puppy and Empire and stuff like that, and ran them through various controls, various AVs and stuff like that. And it was surprising to me how much was still successful, like just stock payloads. And a whole lot has happened in 2 years on that front. Now, granted, we test a lot of very large organizations, companies that can afford really, really strong, layered security controls. I mean, I have one client that has, and I'm not kidding, 4 EDRs on the endpoint, just on the endpoint.
Oh,
and and so it's like, to be evasive in that kind of atmosphere requires a ton of really, really smart people that you surround yourself with that have the time to dedicate to the research to building those kinds of payloads, because you're not going to get that out in 1 week. It's just not going to happen.
So, that's a really good comment, Jason, because Black Hills is in the same boat. We're testing a lot of pretty sophisticated customers. And so I think we have a bias in the sample set because, we have to be sophisticated. There isn't a choice. There are certainly a whole suite of customers out there that are not in that boat. It's just that I don't think we're seeing that sample set. And I'm sure there are plenty of other pen testing companies that don't need to go to the extent that we are having to go to.
Yeah, but you know what I find interesting too is when an attacker is using email as the mechanism to deliver something. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overthinking this. You're either delivering them a link to click on, or an attachment of some kind. Correct?
That's typically correct. Yeah.
Right. Most of the time. Yeah. Why haven't we found better ways to share links and attachments other than email?
It's called Signal. Signal desktop.
But then the flip side of that is if we do lock down or make it too inconvenient for the user, as Larry has already pointed out, users are just going to find ways outside of email to deliver links and attachments.
Right. It goes right back to that old convenience versus security argument, or operations versus security argument. I mean, the opportunities exist because people want it to be easy, and you're not going to be able to fight that. And let's face it, we kind of like that, right? We want those mechanisms as pen testers.
Well, there has to be some mechanism. I think is it very challenging for organizations to secure email specifically from those mechanisms of delivering files and links?
Yes. Well, and specifically so files, when I send phishing campaigns, I never send files anymore, because files are pretty much on the lockdown. So like if you're sending like a .doc or a .docm or a .lnk or something like that, you got to be. I mean, that has to be a really spectacular payload to make it through, because there's a ton of indicators that are just going to say, oh well, there's base 64 in here in this file. I don't know what it is, but it's therefore bad, and so it just gets blocked. Now on a URL, right? With solutions like Proofpoint, Mimecast, stuff like that, they do URL redirection. So all the emails that come in, you hover over that link, it doesn't say, myevowebsite.com. It says URL proofpoint something.com. And it goes through and does dynamic inspection of the site. And so, I would make the argument, and, for better or for worse, that right now to send a phishing campaign, best for the organization to get it into the inbox. And the reason why I say that is because that way the organization has controls where they can go in, trash a bunch of, malicious emails. If they do analysis on that and they see that it's bad, they just delete it. Whereas a campaign that we do that's pretty successful, and I gotta tip my hat to one of my coworkers, Scott, who came up with this. we do text-based phishing, and it works spectacularly.
Yeah.
Where instead of trying to get in the email, you're sending it directly to the user's phone, and now there is none of that URL rewriting protection in place. It's just a raw URL, and the user clicks on it. They enter in whatever information we want, and that's actually a very successful attack as well.
Yeah, I would think you could be wildly successful as an attacker if you were able to skirt around email, because as Jason, as you pointed out, there are some great protections inside of email already. It's just a matter of how crafty you are to get around them. But
I would want to add one comment to Jason's statement there, and I would generally agree that attachments are a much tougher bar. They're very high to get in, and I think there's a tendency on our behalf, where possible, to send more campaigns that are of the credential harvesting nature, which are links, right? Yeah. Now, one of the effective mitigations against credential harvesting is of course to make sure you've got multi-factor facing the outside everywhere.
Yep.
Because if they do, then credentials that I'm harvesting, may be interesting from a report standpoint, but it's not going to do me much good.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Especially on the two-factor part.
Yep.
Two-factor is great. It's definitely a whole lot more work to try and get around. Usually involves me calling up the user, but you call up the user and you manufacture a problem. And you say, like, listen, did you get a suspicious email? Yes, I did. That was a phishing campaign. Did you click on it? Yes, I did. And now they're panicking, and you smooth it over for them. You're like, oh, I understand. You clicked on it. Everyone does. It's not a big deal. I would never ask you for your password, but I need that code that pops up on your phone, because I need to make some security changes to your account, et cetera, et cetera. User gives you the code. I've had users give me 2 or 3 codes, including backup codes, because they're terrified that I'm going to turn them into security. And you make up the problem, and then you solve the problem for them. And that's what any social engineer will tell you. That's what they're good at. So we do that a lot, and that's actually it's successful when trying to get users to give up that kind of information. Give them a little bit of a scare, and then tell them it's all right. I'll put this fire off for you. No big deal. Just give me your VPN code.
One variant on that I really like is to send in a fish that's based on the multi-factor, right? You send in a campaign that says, "Hey, here's your multi-factor code. If you did not request this code, click here."
And please give us your username, password, and multi-factor code so that we can relay that immediately. Thank you very much.
Right. So there's a lot of variations on a theme, right? But it is definitely harder than it used to be.
Yeah, 100%.
I always thought
100%.
a great fish, and I don't know if you've used this, would be to send the user an email and say that they've already been a victim of a phish, and you need to click here, otherwise there'll be consequences. Like the email that, like, when you're done with a phishing campaign, I'm assuming users get email about, hey, we just had a test done and you were one of the users and you need to click here and go do training. Like, that would be my phish. I'm sure we've done that before.
I like that.
Put the
hijacking the unsubscribe links. Those are fun too.
Every goddamn time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
Why would you not?
Because people implicitly trust those unsubscribe links. It's so true.
Yep, every goddamn time.
I tend to do that like in a very tightly controlled environment. So like disables not Java, maybe even disables JavaScript, right? If I'm going to go click on a bunch of them, because I know like that's a likely
do it from your
place.
phone. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You're on Android, right?
Yeah, that's a problem.
I've got a question for Jason along the lines of phishing campaigns. If you are in a situation where you have an option to send in a fully loaded phish, payload, shell, the whole bit, and you have, let's say, 23,000 users, would you send that payload to everybody, or would you send the payload to a percentage of the users?
I would come up with 4 groups of 5 users, and I would send them to groups of 5 BCC'd, and I would space it out about 10 minutes apart. And believe me when I tell you, if you do that, and you're sending links instead of attachments, you're not going to have any problems from email-based security controls that might stop you, because they're all looking for like really, really fast, spam type stuff.
Well, right. I wasn't actually getting at that issue. I understand the mail gateways are pretty good at really fast spam stuff, but What I was getting at is actually shell overload. Right? What if what if you dump it on them and you're like, oh shit, now I got 20,000 shells coming into my C2 infrastructure.
Yeah, right. Especially if it's on like something like a T2 micro or something like that. You're like, oh man, I need a load balancer for all these shells.
Yeah, if you need elastic infrastructure to handle all the shells coming back, I think that it's not really your problem; it's the organization's problem.
That sounds like a great problem to have.
Right? Yes.
I love that problem.
Yeah, Jaffa, that scenario. I remember back in the day before Carlos had done some of his tools that we were talked about. I can remember scripting Metasploit to have every machine in the organization, because I had the local admin password that was the same, to create a shell back to me and gather the list of users so I could figure out which one was in the local in the domain admins group. And I had like 2,000 shells, and Metasploit wasn't having it.
Yeah. Shell
now
overload.
if I get one shell, I'm happy.
Yeah, you do.
That's
one
it. That's all you
shell
need right now. It's just
Oh yeah.
the
If I launch my campaign in 20 seconds, I get a shell. I do my happy dance, even if I've sent out like 500 of them. I don't care.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But also,
doesn't matter what time of day it is. You are pouring something at that moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not because of Active Directory and its issues. Let's just say that it has. It's not so much as important to target your fishes. Like if I had 23,000 people, one of the things I might do is break it down by department, start looking at financial departments and other, where the intellectual property is, right? Do OSINT on those users and construct campaigns specific to individual users or groups of users that are likely to have access to the data. Active Directory, in a lot of cases, throws that out the window, basically, because everyone is trusted. We want to make it easy for everyone.
I'm going to go.
But do you still do one or the other or both on a test, targeted stuff and kind of spraying just to get a foothold? Jason, I'll go to you first.
Yeah. Sorry, on the red team side, I do not do a whole lot of spraying in terms of phishing. In other words, I'm very discriminate when it comes to choosing targets. And so, obviously, targets that I don't choose are, like IT or things like that. Targets that I do choose 100% of the time, people that are in treasury, actuarial, controller, finance, anything like that, because they might already have access to the data that I need. And I don't have to do a whole lot of lateral movement, because if you're going to get caught anywhere, it's going to be in, some sort of sloppy lateral movement, attempt. And so if I can land on a box that has access to employee or financial data, then that's it. The goal has been accomplished at that point. And so, I will absolutely be selective. And, my primary source for that is LinkedIn. And that I love pulling data back from LinkedIn. It's fantastic. I normally don't have to go a whole lot of other places to get data back on users, because LinkedIn is title and name. And with that, I can normally extrapolate email address and such.
What's interesting? You said something interesting, Jason, that you don't normally target IT. And I think a lot of IT and security people think we're good at not falling for a phishing attack. But is it that we're not good, or is it that people aren't trying to phish us because they don't want us to catch them because we have a quick escalation point and are more technical and probably could? Or is it that we just don't see as many phishes?
You know what? It's so funny that you would say that, because I have a client who all he does is phish IT, and what he does is he's got the same email that he uses every time, and it's free Star Wars tickets, and he just puts the latest Star Wars logo right up on top, and he gets like 50% click rate. I can't even believe it. I'm like, oh man, I'm doing this all wrong.
Kidding.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
I'm clicking on that shit.
Nerd harder. Yeah, of course.
I'm clicking on that shit.
Like if I give you something that was like, free Amazon T2 large instance for 3 months, heck yeah, I'd click on that.
Yeah, right.
Click.
I might go for the Star Wars. I'd be more apt to go for the Star Wars, I think.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, we spend all this time coming up with different campaigns.
Lee, did you take some helium during the break there? You're okay?
He's got a frog.
Let's try this again.
Okay, it was
we
the
spent
bourbon.
a lot of time trying to bury our campaigns, our phishing campaigns, so that you don't get the hallway chatter revealing it. And yet here's a campaign that works every bloody time without the variants. It's like, holy crap.
Right.
How about on the phones? Do you have to be tricky if I'm SMS phishing? Do I need to shorten my URLs, or just send it and they click it?
Yeah, you would generally shorten it, but you would do something like either your password is going to expire, or you need to resynchronize your account, or something along those lines. Something that is in some way affiliated with the user's account, because that way they're already mentally, I guess, expecting to have to enter their username and password. And so when you send them when you drop them a Cred Harvest link, they're already kind of in that mindset where I'm going to have to authenticate. So they click on it, they see the authentication prompt, and now you have the creds.
Click here for your tickets.
Oh man. And see, that's kind of the problem with that campaign, is that it's great, but I'm not going to get any usable data out of it. It makes for a fun story, but I can't think of a way to spin that to be like, okay, well, authenticate to Active Directory to get your free Star Wars tickets. I mean, I can't think of a way to do that.
Well, they're tied through some human resources giveaway, and which you need to log into the human resources
Click here
portal.
for your service award.
Yeah, you
All
need
right.
Yeah. Human
Take it to
resources is
HR.
giving
I like that.
human resources is giving way. In order to do so, you need to
I
log
mean, you
into
could
the
almost
HR
trick
portal.
the user by sending them a bunch of fishes and letting them flag them, and then sending them an email saying, "Hey, you flagged some really awesome, phishing. Thanks for all of your help. Here's the." You feel free to use that.
So human resources is actually a very useful thing to leverage in a lot of campaigns, right? Because they're usually the guys that are coming in with bad news, or
Right.
some sort of warning to everybody,
or
like,
free
oh,
st-
watch out.
free stuff.
Something that requires an action is
Yep.
really what you guys are
Exactly,
describing, right?
something that requires an action.
Yep.
I think to this day, my favorite campaign of all time is actually my friend Casey developed it and gave it to me, and it was a phishing email that included an Excel attachment, and it was obviously infected to get your shell or something, and the text of the email said, "This is the updated vacation calendar with new blackout dates. Please see the calendar to see how you've been infected. We apologize for any inconvenience, blah, blah, blah." And that was just wildly successful. Shell after shell on that one, because people would forward it and they would, freak out that, I can't make Christmas now and HR is screwing with my life, and everyone already hates HR anyways. So it was fantastic.
I saw one that was a brilliant one. The other day. Which was like doing the Excel spreadsheet, or go here to view, go here to get the bonus information for the entire company.
Yeah.
And then immediately afterwards send a faked recall notice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like shit. I didn't mean to send that to everyone.
Yeah, I did a campaign actually very similar to that, Larry. I sent one from a chief financial officer that said, "Here is that list of salaries that you requested."
Yep. And then
you think people are not going to open that spreadsheet?
Yep. And then the kicker on that one, Joff, is immediately afterwards you send the fake recall notice that so and so has tried to recall this email. Yeah, no, email doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Sorry, I want to take it back. And everybody's going to click on it, right?
You can't unsend.
And that is how you get a 150% click rate.
Yes. Yeah, it's I think it's fascinating that real organizations really are going to have a tough time with this for years to come, because email is still, or whatever mechanism of sharing links and attachments are going to get you in trouble. Even if you had a policy that says, look, you will never get an email with sensitive information like people's salaries in it from anyone. If you do, it's bad. But there's always that case where people forget the rules and send stuff, and it just takes one. And like, oh, maybe they forgot the rules, right? So it's really hard to put kind of hard and fast rules about behavior and checking inside of such an open messaging system like email that allows links and attachments to just free flowing.
I'm seeing users I'm seeing security awareness training having a positive effect. I was actually just on my last red team. I had some back and forth correspondence with a user where I was trying to get to click a link and put in their credentials and then open an attachment. And what ended up happening was the user responded back and said, "No, I can't click on any links. Can you send me over a PDF?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know what version of PDF of reader they're using. I probably don't have an exploit for it." And I said, "Okay, sure." And so what I did was I configured Apache to take an incoming request for PDF and resend it to a .doc file. I sent it over to him, and I said, here you go, here's the PDF. And he's like, no, I'm sorry, I cannot I cannot click any links, and it's a violation of our security practice, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, well, shoot, what do I do at this point? I got a guy who's actually listening to his security awareness training. I was like, well, I can't generate the file in a .pdf. Can I send it to you in a .doc? And he's like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. I was like, all right, sweet. So I sent over the .doc file, and it got blocked. And so that I ultimately had to abandon that campaign, because that was a really good combination of technical security controls plus security awareness training, and it was ultimately unsuccessful, even though I was successful at social engineering the user, and that's what made it interesting. So
that's a fantastic point, Jason. And I think really kind of underscores from the defensive side where you need to be. And you said it. That's the combination of technology at multiple points, different types, and security and awareness and security training for your users. And that's the combination that's going to really help.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, drop in there. It's literally layered controls with diversity, right? It's human controls, process controls, it's technology controls. Yeah. Which is awesome, right?
And it's the way it should be. I mean, we've been preaching that for how many years, right? That, defense in depth exists. Those concepts exist for a reason, and it's good reasons, and because eventually one control is going to break down, or we're going to find an evasion or a bypass, or, whatever. And, when you see it, when you see the control stack layered properly, it's really kind of a neat thing to behold. Even as a red teamer, I was frustrated that I didn't get my shell, but I had to tip my hat to their security team. And I called it out in the report. I was like, hey, you guys did a great job. This was one of the only examples where I had social engineering correspondence with a user who was obeying the security awareness training that they had been taught. And what was so interesting about it is that it was effectively inert. It was a moot conversation. It was absolutely unproductive, and it just wasted my time as an attacker, which is great for the defense in that organization. So, that was a really kind of an eye-opening moment for me, where I was like, here's a guy that's doing exactly what he should be doing, even though I have him convinced that I'm somebody else.
Wow.
Yeah.
You reminded me of a story I heard. Reminded me of a story I had at DerbyCon. Over there, Gary, the piano bar guy, was talking about he worked at a company where they had a 3 strikes you're out, three, clicking badly and you get fired. Yeah. And they were losing a lot of people, and he wound up going to having users that had done the wrong thing come to his office where he would clean their machine. And while he's doing it, he would make them read the HR policy out loud. And usually about 5 minutes in, they're going, holy crap, I didn't know this was against the rules. What the hell?
Yeah. I have a client that if an end user falls for the phishing attack, they will get a personal phone call from the CISO, and they'll have a chat about security awareness training, and it's usually enough to put the fear of God into someone at that point. And I'm kind of on the fence in terms of the 3 strikes you're out. I've had a lot of clients that do stuff like that, and it's more of kind of a scare tactic, I guess. But here's the problem. As an attacker, I know that at some point, if Bob in sales bro Bob just keeps clicking and keeps clicking and keeps clicking, well, at some point you're now a liability to the company. And I kind of pity organizations who have to draw that line in terms of letting people go, because on one hand I'm like, listen, people are trainable. On the other hand, I'm like, well, maybe not everyone is. And so it's a tricky position.
Now, here's an interesting attack that I don't know would necessarily fly with a red team engagement from a company. I think this is something maybe limited to attackers, is that if you target someone and you're after the company's information, doesn't matter how you get it, right? In pen testing, we have rules. I could get that user fired by tripping them with a phishing attack over time. Wait till they get fired. They're probably not going to be too fond of the company they just left, and flip them and use them for inside information, right?
So on red teams, what we do now is, and I think a lot of organizations are either moving to this model or currently using a model similar to it, and that's moving to sort of a trusted insider, I guess, cutover point in the engagement. So, for example, let's say I got 6 weeks on a red team. 2 or 2.5 weeks in, what I normally do is on the kickoff call, I'll tell the client, we need to talk about moving to sort of a trusted insider moment where you can put me in contact with somebody in the company who's basically just going to either let me take control of their machine, either through like Zoom or something like that, or is just going to click whatever I send them an email. And you're kind of simulating that malicious insider to a certain degree.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important for organizations to understand that. It may force them to change their policies or make them understand that their policy isn't the best. Because I'm not even on the fence on that issue, Jason. I don't think someone should be fired necessarily for doing that.
Sure.
I think at some point it does speak to negligence, and perhaps there's other factors that might go into that. That's where I would kind of structure a policy. But I think all of those are teachable moments, and I don't think you shouldn't rule by fear, right? And I wouldn't want my users to fear that if they fall for this, that something bad is going to happen. And there's a lot of examples with that. For example, there's a lot of people that may work in healthcare. If they're a minute late, it's like it goes on the record. It's a demerit. If there's so many, they could be fired. So now you got people driving 90 miles an hour on the highway, running through the parking lot, fighting to get on the bus. It doesn't create the right culture in the organization. Right. I think you need to allow people to learn from their failures. But I do agree that at some point it does speak to negligence. But that should be on a case-by-case basis.
Have you guys heard the story about Henry Ford? I don't know if this is a true story or not, but when I first heard it, it really hit home with me on this topic. It was one of the engineers who was working for Ford at the time, rolling out some of the first automobiles. He made a mistake that costed the company. It was over. I think it was, I don't know, an astronomical sum for being in the early 1910s.
Right.
Like $600,000 or something like that. And he made this mistake. They had to recall a bunch of cars, and the press asked Ford, "Are you going to fire this guy?" And Ford said, "No, I just spent $600,000 training him.
Yeah.
Why on earth would I fire him?"
Right.
And it really hit home there. And so, like, if you get a phone call from the CISO saying, "Hey, you failed this phishing test. I'm going to bring you in, and we're going to talk through our security policy." Those can be fantastic moments that will take somebody to a new height of security awareness in their career.
Agreed.
Yeah. So.
Jason, we also talked a little bit about cloud and how that plays into penetration tests today. I think largely one of the better examples is Azure and that type of infrastructure, and also just how interconnected the cloud is. That either that's the entry point, or if the entry point is in the inside, you have access to the cloud. But I think it was very telling based on your experience how people are using cloud technologies today and how those play in the pen test.
Yeah, on the pen testing and red teaming side, cloud is it's kind of it's kind of a new perimeter. So, for example, if I have an Active Directory account, let's say I get credentials through a Cred Harvest, if I don't have an insider presence into that network, frequently I can just go out to Azure, go out to either portal.azure.com and see what level of subscription I have. Or I can log into Azure and see if I can look at group memberships, user IDs, and there's a whole lot of security researchers doing some really fantastic research on this. Carl, I can't remember his last name, Fossen, I think, from NetSpy just gave a talk about Azure privilege escalation at DerbyCon. Really, really good talk. Mm-hmm. And I know there's people all across various groups that are really researching the cloud because it can be an entry point. And not only that, but an entry point into the internal network can be an entry point to the cloud because a lot of those systems are interconnected. So the attack surface on systems like Azure is still pretty broad. So we have scripts that will brute force Azure. We have scripts that will brute force Office 365, things like that. And a lot of those scripts are common. I know Black Hill's been instrumental in pushing a lot of that stuff out, which is great. So the red teaming community, we've really kind of adopted the cloud as a next gen attack surface because that's exactly what it is.
And my fear for those that are trying to defend networks is that we've had well over 20 years, or just talk about modern maybe directory services and domains. We've had well over 20 years to practice and perfect our craft in the setup and configuration. Now, when a lot of these services now are moving up into the cloud, and I use services is a very general term, we don't have all that experience configuring them in the cloud. All of that experience, I mean, you do carry over some, certainly, right? But a lot of things are just really different, and there's a lot of new considerations specifically with trust and authorization and configuration that we just don't have all those years of experience in configuring and defending to even see what the attacks are like, right? We largely haven't even seen many of the attacks that will manifest. How could we possibly structure our defenses? We haven't even seen the attacks yet.
Yeah, everybody wants to jump on that, right, Paul? That's a great comment because it's what we're seeing with cloud adoption. A lot of if you roll back a few years, a lot of what we were doing in Active Directory was exploiting misconfiguration, right?
Yeah.
And we're still doing it, right?
Sure.
But if you roll forward now to cloud, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're exploiting misconfiguration.
Yes.
And that's exactly what Jason was just talking about. You get a cred, you log in to Azure, and it's like, oh my God, they can see all the group structure, or they can see all the, they can do certain things like join a new host to the domain or something like that, right?
I'm just waiting for the day when, I don't know, like every time an organization reorgs and a new CISO comes in, they're reading CISO Mag and they're like, oh man, this is the latest, greatest, we got to do this or that. I'm waiting for the day, I don't know, like 5, maybe 10 years from now, when CISOs are going to look at the cloud costs and be like, man, I can buy this Dell server. Did you know that we can put a Dell server in a data center and just run everything ourselves?
Full circle, baby.
Right? It's going to happen. Like you heard it here first on Paul Security Weekly. It's going to happen.
But that's, Jason, I think that's a fantastic point, right? Because I completely agree with the misconception people have about moving infrastructure and or services into the cloud to save cost. That's not always the case. And, as you said, might be cheaper to actually host it on site. So we might see this kind of like, not so much a bell curve, but maybe like a plateau, right? Where everyone starts moving all the stuff in the cloud, realizes not all it's cracked up to be, and then it becomes being more like an even 50-50 split, right?
Well, and I will say this. I mean, there's when you move all your stuff to the cloud, and this is especially good for smaller companies or things like that. When you move all your stuff to the cloud, you are effectively buying Microsoft's security model, or you're buying Amazon's security model, and you're trusting that their security is going to be better than your security. Which, if you don't have a major security team, and that might be true, and that's especially true for a lot of organizations where they got just the mainframe boat anchor that they can't get rid of. And that's just dragging down their security because it's mandating 7-character passwords across the organization. They can't do anything about it. That it might actually be a good thing from the security standpoint to move those organizations to the cloud, because it's going to be a major upgrade just by virtue of the fact that all of their infrastructure is now no longer on-prem. And yeah, you can still have those backward, those channels coming back in the network. But, my hope at least is that those organizations are going to get a major boost in security by adopting cloud-based models. And getting their stuff over there and trash some of that old infrastructure that's just dragging them down.
Yeah, and what I find interesting that speaks to more of this 50-50 split that I referenced, and along the lines of what you're saying, Jason, is that when Matt Alderman and I were talking about like which services do you put in the cloud, or which pieces of your infrastructure, and then based on which ones you've decided to move in, what security products and or tactics and things do you need? What I find interesting is, when you put up the whole matrix of like, you can have the operating system, you can have the platform, you can have maybe just your containers, maybe Kubernetes, or maybe, serverless, and then maybe the whole SaaS platform is in the cloud. I said, in any one application, Matt, the thing that really struck me was that I could be in all those columns, right? For my one application, right, I could have some on-premise and some that interacting with SaaS solutions, and everywhere in between. And I think the challenge for organizations today, from a security perspective, is going to be which pieces do I keep? Which pieces do I put in the cloud? How much trust do I want to give, or how much control do I want to give up? And then I think we're going to level out, and people are going to be kind of all over the map based on your application. That's maybe just one application, right? Your other 300 or more, or thousands of applications might look a little different.
Well, and that kind of confusion is a really interesting point. And the reason being is because you got all these organizations that are pushing everything to the cloud. They're pushing apps to the cloud. They're pushing infrastructure to the cloud. And what's happening is that sysadmins, God bless them, but they are trying to learn as much about Azure and AWS as they possibly can.
Right.
And what's happening is they're making basic security mistakes.
Yes.
For example, Carl mentioned this in his Azure privilege escalation talk, which was fantastic. He talked about that if you are a certain level of read access into an Azure subscription, you can store your credentials into a vault and things like that. I'm probably getting wrong what he said, but the point that he was making is that because there is a lot of confusion in terms of how to do things right in the cloud,
Yes.
and because sysadmins are having to learn on the fly, they're making mistakes that attackers can come in and just gobble up. Because these are like, seriously, plain text passwords on the screen. This is some of the basic mistakes that we're seeing. And that is why, my advice to orgs that are doing this, be like, listen, go ahead and push to the cloud. That's fine. But give your sysadmins the training that they need and the security training that they need to do this job right.
But now, come on, raise your hand if like you haven't made a mistake deploying something to a cloud or some new technology as a security professional.
Oh, have not made a mistake?
Yeah.
Right.
I can't raise my hand on
right.
that.
We've all done it. I mean, we told us we had a security incident. We had developers working here, and they're like, we're going to push to the cloud, and Docker got stood up, and the API was exposed to the internet. Like, that happens.
Shit happens.
Shit happens. We dealt with it. We talked about it on the show.
Yep.
You know,
learn.
We learned from it and move on. But that, we've all done it. We've all made some kind of mistake. Hopefully we catch it. Thankfully we caught it early on, right? And hopefully we catch our own mistakes as we learn and go. But everyone makes mistakes when we're deploying new technology, because you can take all the training, and until you're doing it, and I even advocate until you're doing it in production, you haven't really learned. And it goes back to my point. We've had all this time to build physical infrastructure on premises, and now we're trying to put it up in the cloud.
100%.
Hence
100%.
mistakes. And mistakes are what attackers and pen testers and red team is what we take advantage of, right?
It's like you boil it all down. It's just a few categories: security misconfiguration, obsolete software, social engineering, things like that. I mean, you can boil a lot of this stuff down into security misconfiguration, and that's probably, I don't know, the majority of findings that I write on tests are, not anything that in and of itself is especially horrible. It's just that when you stack one misconfiguration with another one with another one, and now you're domain admin, and that's how that works. That's how those chains work. And and so we highlight those things and point out those chains of attack. That goes into every report, a comprehensive narrative on how the chain works.
Yep.
So,
Lee, go ahead.
There's another piece that I'm just starting to catch on to, is that a lot of cloud providers have configured things this way to make your cloud service secure, and they sell that, particularly in the FedRAMP space. There's a lot of NDA around it, and then you get a security assessment from them to see how you've done. They come and check your stuff out, and the playlist they're using to check your security and the list of stuff they sent out to secure it right don't map, and they're not the same things. I think it's a maturity problem. I mean, you really have to be able to crosswalk these, otherwise people are going to be thinking one or the other is right, and they're going to miss the whole picture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and the good news for the defense, I guess, is that attackers are making some of the same mistakes.
Yeah.
For example, they don't know what they don't know. I was doing a red team for a large organization, and they had AWS. They specifically wanted me to target their AWS instance. And so in order to do that, I had to land on an AWS administrator's machine, which I did. And, if you use AWS, you know that there's going to be like a .credentials file that basically just represents your token inside that user's directory. And so if I can take that .credentials file and take that token, I can use the AWS CLI to do things like, spin up new infrastructure, take down infrastructure, create a backdoor account, et cetera, et cetera. And so I took the .credentials file and I copied over to my machine, and I logged into their AWS instance as that user, and I was standing up new images. I was preparing to make a copy of a domain controller. And here's where it can get really scary, because organizations are using the cloud to do things like store backup DCs, and that's a tricky position to be in. And so I was getting ready to make a copy when all my access got shut off, And I was like, man, how did you catch me? And they said, well, we use AWS Guard Duty, and Guard Duty sends back, a ton of alerts and a ton of logs and things like that. And here's what got you caught. Your IP, what you did was you copied the credentials file over to your local machine. That was a different IP address establishing the connection than we had whitelisted.
Huh.
And I was like, oh, shoot. So if I had just made the connection, like stood up a SOX proxy or something, made the connection out through their environment, that I never would have gotten caught. But I made the mistake because I didn't know. And that's kind of a good thing for defenders is, to pay attention to those areas where the red team trips up just because, I don't know everything about guard duty, so I'm ignorant on that. Now I've learned some, but, before when I was doing that, I had no idea.
And as a red teamer, you'll never make that mistake again.
Right. Yes, exactly. But I'm going to make a ton of other mistakes.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's good news for the defense.
That's awesome. Jason, are you ready to play 5 questions with security research?
Yes.
You didn't tell me this was happening.
I do not on purpose, actually, so that
I am ready.
Unless you've listened to the show before, it's a complete and total surprise. So Jason says he's ready. 3 words to describe yourself.
Is a word? We'll say dad, church, and husband.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Fire.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Man. Dang it, I was not prepared at all for this.
That's the end of the point.
If you combine the answers to 1 and 2, you can almost have a book title.
Or damn, I wasn't prepared for this at all. It was a great title.
That would work.
Fire. So if we combine fire and dad, we'll call that hot dad.
There you go. I love it. In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I don't know what that game is.
It's very popular in Europe.
That's right. It's only 2 possible answers.
I'm gonna say first.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Wow, I'm gonna go with George Washington, and his wife's celebrity in my books. That'd be Martha Washington.
Wow. I thought you were going to say George Wallace, which would have been an interesting choice as well. But again, there are no right or wrong answers nor any judgment, at least on the air. So, Jason.
Screw you guys.
I'm going home.
Jason, thank you very much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. Folks can learn more about TrustedSec at trustedsec.com/Security Weekly. Jason, thanks again.
Been great, guys. Take care.